The words my father spoke about family needing to come before all else kept swirling around my thoughts as I looked down at my resignation. After dedicating the last 8 years to establishing myself as a nurse in Boston, I was walking away from it all because of a phone call filled with guilt from my old life in Minnesota. I'm Anna, and at the age of 33, I was under the impression that I'd finally discovered where I belonged. I had a fantastic position at a well-respected hospital, close companions who I considered family, and a comfortable place to live with a view of the water. Then the phone rang and everything changed. My dad had told me, his voice filled with a practiced worry, that Deborah's health was getting worse. Since my brothers were too occupied with their own families, I was the only one with a medical background. I could remember how my hands shook as I listened to him explain all the reasons I was needed back home, that I understood the situation. You see, we need you around here. He went on about how Deborah, my stepmother for the last decade and a half, was no longer capable of keeping up the house. They were in need of someone with medical knowledge to oversee her treatment. He insisted that family has an obligation to care for its own. He didn't go into the reasons why my brothers, Jack and Peter, weren't able to lend a hand, even though they lived only a short drive away. He also didn't explain why they couldn't just pay for assistance using the money from my dad's thriving construction company. And why had this suddenly become so critical now, after Deborah had been managing her long-term health issues for such a long time? Guilt can really make you do things, especially coming from a parent who knows just how to get to you. Didn't we help you so much when you were getting your nursing degree? He had asked me. Now, it's your turn to do something for the family. So that's how I ended up in this situation, packing all my belongings and trying to tell my confused friends why I had to go. My friend Sarah, who I'm closest to, thought I'd lost my mind. She told me over our last coffee together that they were playing me. And you know that's true, correct? She asked. They have 2 sons who actually live in town, but they're making you feel guilty so you'll give up everything you've worked for. I knew in my heart that she was spot on. But each time I thought about changing my mind, I could hear my dad's voice in my head. The disappointment he didn't say outright. The gentle hint about what I owed the family. The hospital understood, or so they said, but they were still let down. My boss had said they'd miss me in the ICU. He also told me that not many nurses have my knack for dealing with tough patients. I folded up the letter where I was quitting my job and put it in an envelope. I was giving up 8 years of building a good name for myself, of becoming known as the nurse who could handle anything. I was throwing away a life I really enjoyed, all because family is supposed to be the most important thing. The fact that I was actually moving back home really sunk in the second I turned into the driveway. My dad was standing on the front porch, not offering to lend a hand with my boxes. Deborah was watching from behind the window in the living room, and she was already giving me a dirty look because of the way I'd parked. My dad greeted me by immediately telling me I needed to move my car. Deborah needs to be able to get her car out of the driveway easily. There were no greetings, no expression of gratitude for my arrival, instead just critique right off the bat. I had actually surrendered my place, placed almost all of my possessions into storage, and driven for half a day to arrive. My feline companion, Luna, remained on edge following the lengthy trip and was vocalizing her distress inside her travel crate. Though evidently, the crucial matter needing immediate attention was the location of my vehicle. The downstairs living quarters are prepared, my father finally said as he descended the staircase. We eliminated a few of the older boxes, but you'll be required to tidy it a little. The downstairs living quarters. I'd completely blanked on this area, which was humid, shadowy, and hadn't been renovated since, like, the early 90s. It was a significant downgrade from my bright, sun-filled Boston apartment overlooking the water. Deborah is in need of aid with ensuring she takes her prescriptions properly, he carried on, tailing me as I went down the basement steps. And the house needs a proper scrubbing. She isn't capable of handling it the way she once did. I scanned the stale-smelling place that I was told would be my new residence. The living space was essentially a single room, along with a washroom that had definitely experienced more favorable times. The floor covering had an odor reminiscent of moth repellent, and the window openings were mere, small rectangles situated close to the upper part of the wall that hardly permitted any sunlight to come inside. I had the understanding that Deborah simply needed some assistance with her medical requirements, I said, carefully placing Luna's travel container on the ground. You failed to bring up the subject of cleaning duties. Relations assist their kin, Anna. You don't think yourself too sophisticated to do some cleaning, do you? There it surfaced again, that tone engineered to evoke feelings of culpability that had proved so effective through telephone conversations. Being there in that damp basement while my career was crumbling affected me in a way the phone calls hadn't. Sarah messaged me on my phone, "Did you get there all right? Is the place as awful as you thought it would be?" Before I could respond, my father made a noise in his throat. "Deborah requires assistance with her morning medicine. You need to be upstairs no later than 7 a.m. and be certain the cat doesn't make a mess down here." As he walked up the steps, I could hear Deborah speaking from the upper floor. "Frank, tell her that she needs to vacuum this area before she carries any more boxes inside." From up here, I can hear the sound of her feet walking on a dirty floor. I glanced at Luna, and she looked back at me with her typical disinterested gaze. What have we gotten ourselves into, you and I? The opening week really defined what was to come. Every day started with Deborah's meds, but that wasn't all I had to do. All of a sudden, I found myself in charge of cleaning the entire house, getting the groceries, preparing the food, washing clothes, and keeping up with the yard, and I was constantly told I was doing it all wrong. "That isn't the right way to fold bath towels," Deborah would say, standing right behind me. "Also, you're using too much laundry soap. It's no wonder you're still unmarried if you're incapable of managing basic household tasks." The medical abilities they were supposedly desperate for were hardly ever used. It mainly seemed that Deborah's worsening condition just meant that she no longer wanted to do chores. She didn't have any issues driving to her weekly card game or spending many hours at the shopping center. Dad was usually nowhere to be found during the day, putting in crazy hours running his construction company, yet he always seemed to take Deborah's side if I brought up any issues. "Your stepmother simply wants things done right," was his usual response. "Is it really a sin to desire things done correctly? Honestly, maybe you'd be settled down with a family of your own if you paid more attention to the details of your own life," he'd continue. Those comments about my being single were relentless, as if all my success as a nurse meant absolutely nothing without a ring on my finger. My brothers, on the other hand, seemed to live their lives without any disruptions. Jack popped in briefly once, glanced at me washing windows, and quickly made up an excuse to rush back to his family. "At least some of us have serious obligations," Deborah remarked after he left. I tried to phone Peter, hoping he would offer some support, but he just chuckled. "I'm glad it's you and not me, sis. You know how Deborah can be." Yep, I knew all too well. Like the time she rearranged my basement apartment while I was out picking up her medications, arguing that my mess was affecting her anxiety. Or the time she tossed out my cherished coffee mug simply because it didn't fit the style she was going for in her kitchen. Sarah was constantly telling me to get out of there. "You're a top-notch ICU nurse," she messaged me. "Your former boss called to see if you'd think about coming back. They still haven't found anyone to replace you." However, I felt this nagging guilt that kept me from leaving every time I considered it. Family is the most important thing. That's the principle I grew up with. Even when your own relatives saw you as nothing more than someone who worked for free. I reached my limit precisely 4 weeks following my arrival. I happened to hear Deborah conversing on the phone with her sibling while I was tending to her beloved rose bushes. She was saying how ingenious Frank was. He got Anna to return home by making my health seem worse than it was. Now we've got someone to clean for us at no cost, and she can't say a word because we're related. To be honest, though, she's really not that skilled at it. Certain individuals just don't grasp what proper cleaning entails. My hands shook as I removed weeds from Deborah's treasured flower bed. Her words bounced around in my mind. Someone to clean for free, making my health issues seem bigger than they were. They'd tricked me into abandoning my whole existence. It wasn't because they required medical attention. It was because they desired someone to work for them without pay. Later that day, while I was getting their supper-ready chicken that had to be grilled precisely to Deborah's specifications, I began jotting things down on my phone. Each task, each bit of fault-finding, each disparaging remark. I documented the time spent cleaning versus any real medical assistance Deborah required. I even began looking at what she was posting online. Photos from the tennis club, shopping trips, gatherings for bridge players. This certainly didn't look like a health emergency to me. "The chicken's too dry again," Deborah declared at the table, shoving her plate away. Honestly, Anna, considering you managed to get a nursing degree, you'd think you could get simple cooking right. I glanced at my father, expecting him to stick up for me, but instead, he just handed Deborah the salt without even looking at me. And the roses haven't been pruned correctly either, she went on. I watched you flailing around out there. There wasn't a shred of proper form to what you were doing. I devoted a whole 3 hours to tending to that garden, I commented in a low voice. Evidently, I wasn't accomplishing anything of importance with that time. And geez, the windows need another scrub. I can spot blemishes all the way from here. I put my utensil down on the table. It's interesting how your physical ailments never seem to impede your ability to critique my housekeeping, yet consistently excuse you from ever participating in it. The subsequent quiet was almost unbearable. The fork in my dad's hand stopped midway to his mouth. What exactly did you just say to us? The tone of Deborah's voice was a clear warning sign. Earlier today, I overheard you on the phone, boasting about how brilliant the pair of you were, exaggerating the severity of your medical conditions in order to get me to come here. I'm not sure what it is you imagine you heard, she responded. I heard plenty about how you were tricking me into acting as your personal, cost-free cleaning service, about how you found amusement in how simple it was to pressure me into abandoning my professional life. Finally, my dad raised his head to look at me. Hold on now, he started. No, you hold on a moment, I cut him off. I'm a registered nurse who works in intensive care. Did you honestly believe I wouldn't pick up on the fact that Deborah's deteriorating health gets significantly better whenever there's some kind of shopping to do or a tennis match to play? I have periods when I feel well and periods when I don't, Deborah replied sharply. Actually, it's more like you have days where you do chores and days where you have fun, and by some coincidence, all the chore days fall to me. The expression on my dad's face grew stern. You're acting without respect, and you're the ones engaging in manipulation. You told me lies to lure me here, exploited the fact that I have medical skills, and transformed me into someone who does the cleaning without getting paid. So after everything we've done on your behalf, that's how he began. I wondered, what is it that you think you've actually accomplished? Other than manipulating me into abandoning my professional life and relocating to a damp cellar, my father stated that the basement apartment was a pretty good deal, his cheeks flushing. Most young adults would feel thankful for cost-free lodging. Was that free? I gave a short laugh. I'm toiling from sunup to sundown. I'm the one who cleans your whole house, prepares every meal, and takes care of your yard. If you were to pay someone to be a full-time housekeeper, it would set you back several thousands of dollars each month. Family supports each other, that's how he started to explain things, but I didn't let him finish. Really? Because Jack and Peter are part of this family too, and yet they're free to live their own lives, pursue their own professions, and have their own places to live. Why aren't my brothers here pitching in? Your siblings have their own families to worry about. And I possessed a career, a real life, a gorgeous apartment with a view of the harbor, all of which I had to relinquish because you outright lied about Deborah's need for medical attention. Deborah pushed herself out of her seat, the legs of the chair making a noise as they scraped against the ground. I am in need of care. It's not like I don't need anything just because I have a few days where I feel better. Feel better? I reached for my phone. Why don't we go over what you did this week when you were feeling better? On Monday, it was the tennis club. Tuesday, a 4-hour shopping spree at the mall. Wednesday, you threw a bridge party for your friends. Thursday, a lunch date with some friends. Friday, you made plans for your cruise vacation next spring. It's hardly a crippling illness. My dad seemed to be having a hard time sitting still. Now Anna, he sighed, don't you now Anna me. For 8 solid years, I worked hard to build up my career. 8 years I put in to become someone patients could trust during the worst times in their lives, and you took advantage of that. You exploited my capacity for sympathy. We were in need of assistance. Actually, what you really wanted was assistance. There's a real distinction between those two things. You had the option of paying for someone's services. You were capable of enlisting the aid of your children. You could have come up with plenty of perfectly sensible solutions. Instead, you tricked your daughter into essentially being your personal assistant. That's just not right, Deborah complained. We provided a place for you to live, a damp basement with a bathroom that's basically unusable, all while I'm constantly cleaning your whole house and getting nothing but complaints that I can't seem to do anything correctly. My hands trembled as I stood up from the table. The sheer extent of their dishonesty was finally sinking in. You know what really gets to me? I kept going, my voice starting to crack. If you had truly required medical assistance, I would have figured out a way to help you without completely ruining my own well-being. I would have assisted in coordinating your care, found support systems, made all the necessary plans, because that's what families are really about. And where do you think you're going? My dad questioned as I started moving toward the steps to the basement. I'm going to get my things together. I'm finished playing the role of your unpaid cleaning lady. I started tossing clothing haphazardly into my suitcase as they trailed after me down the stairs, both of them speaking at the same time. Luna observed the situation from her spot on top of the dresser, her tail moving back and forth as the argument became more heated. You simply cannot just walk out on us, my dad argued. What about your responsibilities to us? My responsibilities? What about what you two owe me? Parents are supposed to want their children to thrive, not manipulate them into sacrificing all their goals. We never forced you to give up a single thing, Deborah chimed in. I realized you decided to come here. It was all based on a lie because you weren't honest about requiring medical help. My father cautioned me to speak more softly. This conduct is far from what we instilled in you while raising you. Actually, you trained me to be susceptible to influence, to consistently prioritize the needs of others over my own, and to feel bad for having a thriving career instead of being content as a housewife. Luna climbed into her crate on her own, without any prompting. That clever feline understood we were departing. Deborah threatened, telling me if I walk out of that door, don't think you'll be invited back. I paused my packing and turned my attention to both of them. Is that really how you're going to handle this? More pressure? More trying to control me? My dad began again, saying we're your family. Not at all, you're individuals who exploited a person who was concerned enough to be there when you called, who utilized my occupation, my empathy, to take advantage of me. To me, that isn't family, it's using someone. Deborah retorted that I was exaggerating. She asked Frank to tell me I'm being dramatic, but it seemed something I said finally resonated with him. The way he was looking at me was different. Maybe he was acknowledging me as an adult for the first time. He suggested that possibly we could have a rational conversation. We could develop a more suitable agreement. There won't be any agreement at all. I'm returning to Boston, returning to my work. I'm heading back to people who treat me with actual respect. Deborah said in a self-satisfied tone that my former position probably doesn't even exist now. As a matter of fact, it does. They've been keeping my job open, waiting for me to come back. Last week, my boss contacted me. That smug expression vanished from her face. So, you orchestrated all this? Actually, I was just giving you the opportunity to prove I was wrong about you. I was hoping you'd demonstrate that this situation involved more than simply wanting free help around the house. I really held on to the hope that there was something else at play. After zipping up my luggage, I picked up Luna's travel crate. As I started making my way towards the staircase, it felt like the burden of their dishonesty, their controlling behavior, and their thoughtless unkindness was finally beginning to dissipate. You'll be sorry, Deborah yelled in my direction. No, I answered back without turning around. My only regret is letting you control me from the beginning. My only regret is that I didn't realize your deception sooner. But making the decision to leave? That's the first good choice I've made since I came back here. The drive back to Boston, which took 12 hours, felt like escaping a jail. With every mile I drove, I was putting greater distance between myself and their controlling behavior, their negative feedback, and their insensitive mistreatment of me. Luna was sleeping quietly inside her carrier, and she was most likely happy that we were leaving that musty basement. My phone kept alerting me of new texts and notifications. My dad was switching back and forth between making me feel bad and ordering me, in an angry tone, to come back right away. It seems Deborah had gotten in touch with everyone she knew to tell them a fabricated story about how I abandoned them when they needed me. My brothers sent me texts, and you could tell they were feeling awkward while asking me to consider coming back, but it's worth noting that neither of them offered to take my place and help. However, I had other texts as well. Sarah had already scheduled times for me to see 3 different apartments in the vicinity of the hospital. My former boss verified that the job was still available and even proposed giving me a higher salary as an incentive to come back. The people I used to work with sent me messages expressing their excitement about me coming back. I paused my trip and checked into a hotel roughly halfway there. I just needed some time to think. I was sitting on the pristine bed in my room while Luna investigated her new environment, and that's when I finally allowed myself to start crying. It wasn't because I was sad or felt guilty, but because I felt such a wave of relief and still felt angry about how completely I had been taken advantage of. My father gave me another call at around midnight. He began with, "Your stepmother is really quite upset." "Oh, is she really? Or is she just mad that she lost her unpaid maid? Anna, please. We can figure something out." I asked. "Figure what out? Another attempt to make me feel bad about not prioritizing family? More untruths regarding Deborah's well-being? We really do need the assistance." Then, like most families do when they need support, then hire someone. Stop expecting your daughter to give up everything just because you don't want to spend money on somebody to help around the house. He didn't say anything for a little while. I didn't know. I wasn't thinking. Is that the truth of it? I responded with, "That's right, you weren't thinking. You weren't considering what you were asking me to let go of. You didn't stop to think about what it must be like to be treated like a live-in helper in my own family's house. You simply saw a chance to get cost-free labor and jumped at it." That's not a reasonable accusation. It wasn't reasonable to lie in order to get me there either. It also wasn't reasonable to watch Deborah nitpick everything I did while she was out playing tennis and arranging vacations. It's not like anyone thought I'd be living in a dank basement while my brothers carried on without any disruption to their lives. Once I ended my call, Aunt Ellen, my mom's sister who always knew Deborah was putting on a show, phoned. "I'm really glad you did that," were her exact words. Finally, someone had the guts to confront them. Of course, my relatives don't agree with my stance. They're so accustomed to catering to Deborah's every whim. But here's the thing, why don't they be the ones to tidy up her place, tend to her yard, and put up with her relentless fault-finding? Let's see how long they manage. Her words turned out to be spot on. Almost immediately, my brothers started receiving requests for assistance, and all of a sudden their schedules were just too full. Isn't that something? Once I was back in Boston, my world pieced itself back together more quickly than I anticipated. The hospital was happy to have me return. I managed to find a bright and cheery apartment in the area I used to live, only this time with an extra room to use as my office. Sarah joined me while I bought new furniture, replacing all the things I'd stored back at my dad's. Just 2 weeks after I moved out, Deborah put up a subtle complaint on social media, asking if anyone knew someone reliable to help her clean her house. It's too bad that so many people don't grasp the meaning of family loyalty anymore. Kids these days just don't feel any obligation or accountability. The replies were really eye-opening. My cousin Rachel, who spent a summer cleaning for them while she was in college, shared her own encounters with Deborah's completely unrealistic expectations and never-ending nitpicking. Other people started joining in with comparable stories. That post really blew up in my face, exposing a habit they had that I was totally unaware of. The heat was on for my brothers, it seemed. Eventually, Jack's wife reached out to me by phone. She told me they're expecting us to confess our sins every single weekend. "Jack is still coming up with reasons to avoid it, but your father's starting to get insistent." "How did you put up with that for so long?" she wondered. "I didn't," I responded. "That's the reason I packed my bags and left. Peter tried to assist them for just a single day, and that was enough for him. That night he phoned me, sounding like he'd been through a war. Deborah forced me to redo her pantry 4 different times because the cans weren't perfectly lined up. Then, she started griping about the way I'd folded her linens. Dad was just sitting there, letting her nitpick at every little thing. I didn't have a clue about what you were going through. My Aunt Ellen kept me in the loop about the family drama that was unfolding. It turns out that 3 different cleaning ladies had quit after being there for less than a week. Deborah's bridge friends were learning the truth, which was damaging the perfect picture she tried so hard to present. Finally, my father was seeing the effects of his coddling actions. Ellen informed me that they're finding out that hearing professionals comes at a price, and apparently no one wants to work for them, no matter how much they offer to pay. Your dad's actually washing his own clothes for the first time in 2 decades. It was a month after I got back when my boss called me in for a meeting. I was scared of getting in trouble for leaving so suddenly before, but instead, she gave me a promotion offer. She told me plainly that I had been missed. It wasn't just my abilities, but my commitment to integrity that was lacking. We definitely need more nurses with your values in charge, she said. Later that night, in my new place, I watched as the sun went down over the water. Luna was stretched out happily on the sill, and we were both, at last, feeling calm. Another text popped up from my father. Your absence is really felt around here. Deborah is missing your assistance, I replied to him. I'm sure she does, but I am not up for negotiation these days. 6 months after my departure, I got a surprise call from Marie, Jack's wife. She said I needed to listen to what she had to say. I was delivering documents to your dad's place, and I happened to hear Deborah complaining to her sister about the inability to find a housekeeper who would stick around. She actually admitted that Anna was so much better, because as family, she was essentially trapped and couldn't leave when I found fault with her work. It didn't even shock me anymore. Did my father comment? That's what's interesting. He actually said something. He told her that her attitude was why they couldn't retain help and that perhaps, had she been nicer to me, none of this would be an issue. So it turns out the house wasn't magically running itself. I found out through the family grapevine that they finally had to pay top dollar to hire a professional cleaning company due to their negative image. And since no one could meet her standards, Deborah had to start washing her own clothes. My father was compelled to pick up some fundamental cooking abilities. My Aunt Ellen forwarded me a snapshot of what used to be their impeccably kept garden, which was now overtaken by weeds and wild growth since Deborah's health complications stopped her from tending it, but she also wouldn't allow anybody near her beloved rose bushes. Karma, Ellen messaged along with the image, is a whiz with the soil. My fresh start really took off, unlike those roses that were never cared for. I moved up the ladder at work, began instructing some nursing courses in the evenings, and even went on a few dates with someone who valued my job and how independent I was. For the holidays, my Aunt Ellen threw the annual get-together for everyone, changing things up after so many years. For the initial time ever, Deborah didn't organize the party, and couldn't nitpick everything people brought to the table or figure out the seating arrangement to show who was on her good side and who wasn't. I went to the party, carrying a pie from the store that would have offended Deborah's refined tastes. My brothers and their spouses looked like they were thankful to have a holiday free from any tension. My father showed up all by himself. It seemed Deborah had declined the invitation since she couldn't host the party herself. When we were alone for a second, my father pulled me aside. I've been reflecting on everything, he mentioned, appearing more aged than I recalled. I noticed you working hard to build up your career, transforming into somebody patients rely upon, developing a life that you felt good about, and instead of feeling pride as well, I contributed to destroying it. What was the reason? I questioned. What made you allow all of this to happen? He exhaled heavily. It was less difficult to give up your joy than to manage Deborah's wants. I'm not content with that. It wasn't exactly a heartfelt "I'm sorry," but it was still more of a recognition of things than I thought I'd ever get. We weren't connected like we used to be, and maybe never would be again, but there was at least some realness between us finally. Afterwards, as I was assisting Ellen with the dishes, I realized I was grinning at how much better life was when you're not constantly striving for perfection or trying to get a pat on the head from folks who'd never give you one. Ellen passed me a plate to wipe and posed a question. Do you know what the ultimate act of getting back at someone is? And I replied, saying, what would that be? To which she said, just living your best life, and from my perspective, you're killing it.